Yeah. BTV Productions, the Cultural Preservation Station. Tune in. Tune in. Hey, yo. Black education, cultural preservation, Taylor BTV, because elevation. Tune into the station, we rockin' the whole nation. That's right, we rockin' the whole nation, prepping new generation for mental activation. Taylor BTV's the new sensation. Stop the hesitation and learn something new. My girl Taylor B's here to show and prove.
Peace, love, justice, and accountability. Welcome to Justice on Earth Weekly on BTV, where Black education empowers true vision. I am Taylor B, your host, and this is where we keep the record to protect the people and protect our peace and to raise the consciousness of the community as we demand justice on planet Earth. Tonight, we are dealing with a story that's pretty heavy, family, but it is very necessary that we talk about it. Modern day lynching still exists. It did not end. It just really evolved. And in some ways, it was really legalized. So we're going to be taking a look at this and just looking at a little bit of the history, looking at some of the modern day things that are going on. So tonight, we're going to be looking at a few deaths that have happened, but we're also going to be looking at the system that explains these deaths away. We know that Black people are still being found dead under suspicious circumstances. The real story behind that, though, is that many families are saying, and we've seen it for ourselves, that the official process moves too fast and closes the door, labeling the deaths as suicide, accident, undetermined, or drowning. Once those words are placed on the paper, family, the public pressure disappears, the investigation posture changes, and the family is the one that's left fighting two battles. They're fighting their grief, and they're fighting to get the official story told. They're fighting for an official investigation of the story. So the question becomes, is the system investigating these deaths, or is it insulating them from responsibility and accountability? Now, for the historical frame, we're going to be using Equal Justice Initiative, as they have documented nearly 6,500 racial terror lynchings between 1865 and 1950. That history matters because lynching was never just about murder. It's about terror. It's about social control. It's about sending a message to the whole Black community. In the past, this terror was played out in the public scene where people would come, they would have picnics, they would have barbecues, they would see us being lynched, they would lynch us, take pictures, send them as postcards, take our body parts and barbecue them and eat them. Some of them would take the body parts and put them on their mantles. So again, this is about inflicting terror, and it's about sending a message. This is what it's always been about, right? Now, today, the concern is that there's an eraser going on with this procedurally, right? So it's not even getting to the point where it's being labeled or called a lynching. It's not even getting to that point because the paperwork becomes the new rope. The manner of death becomes the cover-up, right? The words that they put on that file when they first arrive on the scene decide whether the death is pursued as racial terror or official homicide, or if it's quietly filed away and no evidence at all gets taken. Now, before we get into the Crimson Record, I want to read this real quick. So before we move forward into the Crimson Record, I want to read this from the Equal Justice Initiative. More than 4,400 African Americans were lynched across 20 states between the end of Reconstruction in 1877 and 1950. Racial terror lynchings were more than just about hangings. They involved groups of white people committing acts of fatal violence against African Americans to install fear in the entire Black community. These lynchings were frequently carried out in broad daylight, and perpetrators could expect impunity. Government officials frequently turned a blind eye or condoned the mob violence. This era of racial terrorism shaped the geographic, social, and economic conditions of African Americans and America as a whole. Lynching and racial violence fueled the forced exodus of millions of Black people as refugees from the South into urban ghettos in the North and West during the first half of the 20th century, and created a social environment where racial subordination and segregation was maintained with limited resistance for decades. Many Black refugees and exiles who fled the American South faced marginalization and disadvantaged circumstances in the urban North, West, and Midwest. Black people who remained in the South faced continued threat, terror, and humiliation rigidly maintained by legalized racial segregation. The violence and terror of lynching created a legacy of racial inequality that has never been adequately addressed in America and continues to sustain racial injustice and bias. Okay, so that is what the Equal Justice Initiative has to say about this. And I just want to see if they had a marker up here of one. Um, let me see. Nope, that's it. So I will leave this here. I was trying to find. Okay, I do want to show this because this is the Legacy Museum, which displays 800 soil collections from around the country of lynchings throughout that period. And this is preserved in a museum. And I believe their museum is in Alabama, Montgomery. It's in Alabama. It's in Alabama. Okay, so I wanted to get that out there. Let's get back to it. All right, family, let's get back to it. So if you want to know more about the history of lynching, you can visit the Equal Justice Initiative. I will have that link down below for you. Okay, let's talk about the current record. Okay, now, there's a source called Julian 2026 report, A Crimson Record. This report examined more than 70 suspected modern day lynchings across 7 southern states since the year 2000, and more than 150 fatal hate crimes and suspicious deaths. That's a lot, family. That's a lot. The states that they examined this in were Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Texas. This matters because it moves the conversation beyond one case. It gives us a documented pattern of this going on. So you get to see the pattern that arises, and you get to see them running to document these things as accidents, undetermined, and all this kind of stuff to erase, right? Erase the evidence of a lynching. Okay, so this becomes important as we get through the next few slides, because this documented pattern, like I said, it shows that there may be modern day lynchings happening, but legally they're not being adjudicated as a lynching, right? In these cases, the advocates, the families, and the investigators are all saying that the case was mishandled, misclassified, or inadequately investigated because it got closed too soon and the evidence wasn't properly, secured. So this is the issue that is going on with this today. Now, let's look at how Julian defines modern day lynching. The Julian report defines modern day lynching as a discriminatory killing involving more than one person, carried out for an alleged offense or perceived threat with the purpose of enforcing supremacy and spreading community terror. That definition matters because there's a category of deaths that must be examined through a civil rights lens when there are signs of racial terror, multiple actors, institutional silence, or a quick official explanation that shuts down any type of deeper investigation where justice can be served. This is how we know that this is a pattern, right? Because there's been plenty of situations where this has happened, and this is how it's been documented. So we have to continue to keep the record and document this pattern so we can demand transparency, and we can demand that these deaths be looked at the right way the first time. So here's how they do the erasure. A quick classification can control everything that follows a suspicious death. If the first official theory is suicide, an accident, a drowning, or undetermined, the scene is not going to be worked like a normal homicide, family. They're not going to get the witnesses. They're not going to get the phone records. They're not going to get the evidence. They're not going to do any of that with the same intensity or with the same urgency or even asking the same types of questions that they would ask if it was a perceived homicide. So families are the ones that end up left with fighting for an independent autopsy, bringing in an outside legal team and having to raise money to get all this stuff done just to get basic questions answered. The lynching may happen in the field, but the erasure happens in the paperwork and in the legalities of the whole system. Now, this is where this really becomes important, family. This is where all this that we've been talking about so much becomes important. So, March 29th, 2022, the Emmett Till Antilynching Act became law. Okay. This makes lynching punishable as a federal hate crime when a conspiracy to commit a hate crime results in death or serious bodily injury. The maximum penalty of this can reach up to 30 years in prison. But there's one critical question, right? There's one thing that's looming here, right? Everything we just been talking about. If the suspicious death is officially ruled as a suicide, an accident, or undetermined before a full homicide and a civil rights investigation can be completed, then the protections of this Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act can't ever really fully be applied. And this is their gotcha, right? This is what they've been doing. They give us these little like symbolisms and trinkets of symbology and trinkets of justice, right? Trinkets of we're going to do something fair for you. They give you that, but then on the back end, they make sure the system never lets anything get classified as a lynching, and then the law never has to be used, right? So this is how they do it. This is the issue that we're talking about tonight. The law can only work when the investigation preserves the evidence required to use the law. Okay. So justice begins with how the death is initially investigated. It begins right then and there. Right now, we're going to look at who the main culprits are here because Mississippi is one of the main culprits, right? They're a centerpiece. This is where you can plainly see the pattern of these suspicious deaths getting reported in a suspicious way, right? The reporting of them and the investigation of them are very suspicious, more suspicious than the death itself, right? So, Julian found that Mississippi, the Julian report found that Mississippi had the highest number in the report. There have been 20 out of the 70 that we just talked about, 20 of them are in Mississippi. 20 of the suspected modern day lynching cases are out of Mississippi. Now, this number is not just a statistic, family, it's a warning. It's a warning that they're trying to send to us, the Black community. So this is important for us to make sure that we're examining this very close and we're looking at it up front and being clear that these people are writing the investigation right out the window, right? When they come and say it was an accident or it's undetermined, right? Mississippi forces us to look at the death investigation system itself. When the medical examiner, and let me get her name, by the way. I meant to have her picture and all that up here, but I'm having some technical difficulties, so I couldn't get that up here. But so when the medical examiner, let me see what her name is, because we're going to give her name. The medical examiner, Stacy Turner, she's the chief medical examiner in Mississippi, and she needs to be investigated, family. And because every case that she has ruled accidental, undetermined, or suicide involving Black people needs to be re-examined immediately. Okay. So when the medical examiner, the coroner, the sheriff, and the prosecutor all shape that first official narrative, they basically are determining whether the public sees a possible hate crime or whether the court sees it as a hate crime, or if it's an accidental death and nothing happens at all and it all gets swept under the rug. And this is basically what's been happening. So when we say systematic racism, this is what we mean by that. It's not just the act of violence, it's the machine behind the violence, it's the machine that protects the violence, it's the machine that misclassifies the violence. All of that stuff is systemic racism. Okay. Now, I just want to read this before we get into the next slide. Maybe let me go over here. So I'll go on this next slide and then I'm going to read this real quick and then we'll go into the slide. Now, I want to read this. I want to read this. So, Stacy Turner, the chief medical examiner in Mississippi, needs to be investigated. And every case she ruled an accident, undetermined, or suicide involving Black people needs to be re examined immediately. Trey Reed was found hanging in the Delta State College campus. She ruled his death a suicide, but an independent investigation ruled it homicide after discovering blunt force trauma and bruising all over his body. She ruled Nolan Wells' death a drowning almost immediately after receiving his body. The Wells family has since requested an independent investigation. She ruled Damian Cameron's death undetermined after a deadly confrontation with law enforcement that left him with internal neck bleeding. Shannon Wilson was embalmed without his family's permission, destroying evidence that could have proved he was murdered. Okay. So again, family, this is Stacy Turner. She's the chief medical examiner in Mississippi. And again, as we can see, all of these deaths had something suspicious going on with them. Okay. They all had something suspicious going on with them. All right. They all had something suspicious going on with them. Okay. So now we see, family, this is what we talk about when we talk about systemic racism. This is on a system level. Okay. These are people who work for the state. These are officials. These are legal officials who swoop in, label it one thing so it never gets the legs it needs to even be labeled any type of lynching or anti-hate crime or anything, right? So this is the problem that we're facing, and this is why we must keep the record and we must document everything. Now let's give a little bit of follow-up on our Nolan Wells case, because he has been our main story for the last couple of weeks. So we know Nolan Wells is the 18-year-old Black student athlete from Mississippi who went to Horn Island during the July 4th weekend and did not return with the group. And his family has questioned key parts of the story, like why did he stay behind without his phone? Why did his friends return without him? And why did his friends have his phone and his keys? And whether or not information was deleted off of his phone. And now the latest update is that the attorney for the family, Ben Crump, has agreed to work with the district attorney's office on inspecting Nolan's recovered cell phone data. He's also said that the DA has committed to presenting the completed investigation to a grand jury. Now, this is good, family, because initially they were just saying a drowning, no foul play, no crime happened. But see, the family had to get the outside investigators to come in and the outside attorneys to come in, a civil rights attorney to come in to look at this through a lens to make sure of all the facts, all the evidence, and an independent investigation is done. Okay, now that case isn't settled yet, so we're still following up with everything, and we're still going to continue to demand transparency and the official narrative, right? We're still going to continue to demand transparency and justice for Nolan Wells and his family. All right. So even in that Damian Cameron's case, like we said, just like the Trey Reed case, independent forensic pathologists reviewed records and evidence saying that his death should have been ruled a homicide by asphyxiation. Okay, so these are the types of things that are being done to sweep these deaths under the rug and make sure they never see that 30 years that the Emmett Till Antilynching Act enforces. Okay, this is to keep all of that at bay. Now, this is where we move from grief to demand. This is where we ask for procedures that can't hide the truth, right? We need to make sure that the timelines are being preserved, that the scene and the evidence is being preserved, that the body's being preserved. Then we're not allowing them just to go ahead and classify Black deaths so quickly that the case can't be investigated properly and give it the proper legs that it needs to receive the justice that it needs and to look at the true story. The family should not have to become forensic team members, right? They shouldn't have to hire all these attorneys and raise all this money just for the state to do their job. Transparency is a must. And all it is, you know, classifying things before they're even investigated, that is the minimum standard of justice, is to be transparent and to make sure that you're looking at things from an equal lens. So that is the main story for this week. And right now we're going to get into our reparations watch, because every week we're going to be doing an update on reparations. Obviously, you see I have my tangible shirt on. No tangible, no vote. So you can do what you will with that. So let's get into our reparations watch. In Evanston, Illinois, there is a reparations housing program that was being kicked off, and this got kicked off a couple years ago. But right now, the Justice Department is moving to intervene with litigation challenging Evanston's reparations housing program. The federal argument is that the program violates equal protection and federal housing laws because it uses race-based criteria. Evanston's position is that the program repairs documented local housing discrimination against Black residents and descendants. So, what that sounds like to me is it's okay to discriminate against Black residents and Black people with the housing policies, but it's not okay to correct that and repair that for the same Black people. So that's just what that sounds like to me. This matters, of course, because Evanston is one of the clearest local reparations models that we have right now in the country, besides from with the stuff that they're doing over in Cali. If this program is weakened or struck down, future programs may be forced to redesign their eligibility. And I really think that they should anyway, because I know from all of our research and all of the things that are going on the grassroots level, we don't approach reparations from a race standpoint. The reparations fight on the grassroots level is lineage based, right? It's based on your lineage and how far you can trace your family back through the US Census. If you can trace your lineage back to the 1890 census, there's a few other criteria that is met with that. So I really do think that the Evanston, Illinois people should have really maybe discussed with the grassroots people about before they set up their criteria for this package, because they really shouldn't have made it based on race. They should have made it a lineage based reparations bill. So the legal question is really about the eligibility. To me, the justice system is basically saying that the Black community can receive injury, but it can't receive a documented remedy. And that's not going to work for us. So reparations now, no tangibles, no vote. We're going to continue our reparations watch and bring you stories about any type of local or national reparations fights or claims or anything that's going on as it pertains to our community. Let's spotlight our Black owned businesses. We're moving right into the economics portion. This week, we're going to be looking at Carter's Cheesesteaks. This is at 1016 Ray Street in Philadelphia, right in the heart of Chinatown, might I add. This Black owned cheesesteak spot made history in Chinatown and also created space for other Black vendors. So make sure you get down there to 1016 Ray Street to check out Carter's Cheesesteaks. Secondly, we're going to be highlighting the Girls Auto Clinic at 7425 Westchester Pike in Upper Darby, founded by Patrice Banks. This is a Black woman-owned auto repair shop and education space that helps people feel confident about their car care. Third off, we're going to be highlighting the Coffee, Cream, and Dreams at 1436 Fairmount Avenue in Philadelphia. This Black woman-owned coffee shop is a community gathering space and a local economic anchor. Economic action belongs in every justice conversation. And right now, as the Black community, we all know that we are in progress of a wealth transfer, of transferring our wealth back to the community. So this is what we need to do. I'll always be highlighting these businesses for us so you guys know where you can go to. So tonight, family, we have kept the record. We have talked about the modern day lynching. We talked about the erasure. We talked about why they're doing that so they don't have to adhere to actually enacting that Emmett Till anti-lynching crime bill. They don't want to have to enact that on anybody. So they just simply sweep things under the rug by misclassifying and quickly classifying deaths as accidental. No, and this is why independent Black media matters. This is why justice on earth matters, right? Because if we allow the state and we allow the government to take control of the causes of death, then we allow them to control whether we ever receive justice. And we have to take these matters into our own hands, okay? Modern day lynching did not disappear. The evidence suggests it learned how to hide and it learned how to get legal, right? It legalized itself. We honor all the families that we mentioned tonight. We also honor all the families that have dealt with any of this type of suspicious death and injustice in the legal system. Continue to demand the record and continue to demand what is right for our community. We're going to refuse to allow this paperwork to bury us twice. This is Justice on Earth Weekly, where the record must be kept. I am Teller B. This is Black Education Empowers True Vision. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight for this episode, and I'll see you next Tuesday on Justice on Earth Weekly. Peace, love, justice, and accountability.